Welcome back to Inside Story. I'm Ray Suarez. One of the architects of the modern conservative movement, Richard Viguerie, called the Pope's new encyclical on the environment a confusing distraction that dilutes his great moral authority and leadership. Elected officials have to be more careful. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush said, "I think religion ought to be about making us better as people and less about things that end up getting in the political realm." As the presidential race heats up, will politicians, Catholic and non-Catholic alike, have to say something about the Pope's contention that pollution is harming what Francis calls our common home, and his proposals for a new lifestyle? Bonner Cohen and Bill Galston are still with me. Bonner Cohen, what do you make of that? Could this have, as the race evolves, an impact on it?
I think it will have an impact. It's very difficult at this point to determine what kind of impact. The Pope, after all, is going to be back in the United States at the end of September to deliver a Mass in Philadelphia, and I'm certain the issue will be raised there again. Also, in the run-up to and during the UN-sponsored climate change conference set for Paris in December, I'm sure his words and thoughts will be evoked too. The real question is, how much will that spill over into 2016 and in what form? And there, I think you can begin to see the outlines of the debate already taking place. Namely, I expect the Republican side to say, irrespective of who the candidate is, because we have no idea who that will be now, to say, listen, we need to be very careful in going about this, because first of all, do no harm. Don't impose policies that ultimately hurt people, denying them access to the many amenities of modern ingenuity that have made our lives much more livable than those that our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents could possibly have imagined. And I think on the Democratic side, where there's probably somewhat less question as to who the nominee will be, I think you will probably see the Pope's words evoked many times. How the American electorate, Catholic and otherwise, will respond to that is quite another question. The Pew Center has done many surveys on various issues that are of concern to Americans, and climate change finishes dead last in year after year. So I think this is going to be a fascinating debate. It's going to be, I think, a rather heavy lift for those who want to advocate policies that will ultimately prove economically disruptive, particularly to those in our society at the bottom who can least afford to pay the kinds of expenses that will come into play once energy prices as a result of certain policies rise.
Bill Galston, is that the path toward reducing the downside risk for Catholic and non-Catholic candidates alike? The threat to lifestyle that Bonner Cohen posits?
I'm going to be a skeptic on this one, Ray. The Brookings Institution, where I've worked happily for 10 years, has a project on religion and public policy. We have executed a number of surveys ourselves, and we are struck by the fact that in these partisan, hyperpolarized times, politics seems to drive theological preferences more than theology drives political preferences. And so my best guess is that liberal Catholics will find moral and emotional sustenance in the words of the Pope, that conservative Catholics will find ways of distinguishing what they like about the Pope and his message from what they don't like about this particular encyclical. And it's not clear to me that a lot of votes are going to shift. As a matter of fact, the more liberal Catholics intensify their advocacy of this document, the more conservative Catholics are likely to rally around the points of opposition.
You heard Bonner Cohen note the calendar.
Yes.
A papal visit and the Paris conference on climate change at the end of the year. Does that work in favor of elevating this issue?
It may work in favor of elevating this issue temporarily, but the American people right now have a lot of other things on their mind. And if I may be so bold, I don't think that lectures on the need to throttle back consumerism are really going to have a very big impact in the United States, because people feel that they've throttled back a lot already, and not by choice. And I don't think that they're in the mood for a message of austerity, even if it's infused with, the marvelous papal theology.
William Galston of the Brookings Institution, Bonner Cohen of the National Center for Public Policy Research, great to have you both. I'll be back in a moment with a last word on politics and faith and whose ox is being gored, the pastor and the planet, tonight's Inside Story.